In almost every major religion, there is a belief that we can communicate with God. And in Christianity, I think we heighten this because we don't only believe we can do that, we believe that God came down as man, dwelled among us, and then made a way for us to have access to his presence on the daily. It became something that lived within us. It wasn't a place we go to, a ritual we do, a sacrifice we make. But now we can communicate, ask questions, and ask God to move on our behalf. We see this concept throughout the Bible, but specifically when the veil is torn, that the holiness of God and the presence of God is now imparted and imputed because of what Jesus has done. Okay, cool story, but that doesn't answer the question. True, but if you're looking for a plain black and white answer to this question, you might not want to be watching this video. But I think there is a story of somebody who helps us to understand why God may seem silent. A Grief Observed by C.S. Lewis was written after his wife had died, and it's a story that takes on the spiritual journey of grief. And I love this book, one, because the rain damage makes the cover live out its own title, but also it is an example of someone who obviously loved the Lord, but experienced enough grief in his life to make him question why God was so silent. It's amazing to read this book and see the perspective of somebody like C.S. Lewis, where he's questioning where God is, and this is following some of his best work. The book reveals a very vulnerable side of C.S. Lewis, where he's not trying to sugarcoat his grief or his doubt in God's presence. He has real doubt about whether God is present and listening to his prayers or understands his feelings and emotions. He doesn't use cliches except when exposing how they are cliches, and he actually addresses God and describes him as a closed door. He says this, "Meanwhile, where is God? This is one of the most disquieting symptoms. When you are happy, so happy that you have no sense of needing him, so happy that you are tempted to feel his claims upon you as an interruption. If you remember yourself and turn to him with gratitude and praise, you will be, or so it feels, welcomed with open arms. But go to him when your need is desperate, when all other help is vain, and what do you find? A door slammed in your face, and a sound of bolting and double bolting on the inside. After that, silence." A slammed door is a quite dramatic way to describe God that I wouldn't expect from C.S. Lewis. But it's clear in this moment, that's how he feels. He doesn't feel like God is listening, or at least he can't tell that he's listening. And this is actually quite common of a response to God and question to God throughout Scripture. David is known to have these types of depressive times where he's asking where God is. And when I read this, it reminded me a lot of Psalm 13, where David says, "How long, God? Will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? And how long will I store up these anxious concerns within me?" In my own life, Psalm 13 has been a psalm I've gone to many times when I felt like God was silent. Not just because you can first ask the question, but if you read the end of Psalm 13 and many other psalms, you see this confirmation of who you still believe God is. And this is what C.S. Lewis does later in the book. Before we see what Lewis's answer to the question is, I often ask myself when I start thinking of this, who am I to say what silence is? When I do go to Psalm 13, or when I do feel like God is silent, what am I defining as God's silence? And oftentimes it's his verbal or his clear leading in my life to make a decision. I start to discredit many other areas where I believe God communicates and has communicated in my life. One that could be a cliche is the fact that we are breathing, we are alive. I'm here in Ann Morrison Park watching a beautiful sunset on the Boise foothills. There are things throughout creation, throughout your life, that could be evidence of communication. But because it doesn't fit our standard, oftentimes we write it out as silence from God. At the end of the book, this is what Lewis says. "When I lay these questions before God, I get no answer, but a rather special sort of no answer. It is not the locked door. It is more like a silent certainty, not uncompassionate gaze. As though he shook his head, not in refusal, but waving the question, like, 'Peace, child. You don't understand.' Can a mortal ask questions which God finds unanswerable? Quite easily, I should think. All nonsense questions are unanswerable. How many hours are there in a mile? Is yellow square or round? Probably half of the questions we ask, half our great theological and metaphysical problems, are just like that. The best is perhaps what we understand least.